So many of us have heard the term mom brain, mom amnesia, pregnancy brain. These are all quite familiar. And usually, when you hear that term, you have a certain perspective about that mom, that she's forgetting things. The truth is, the science behind what we call mom brain is not exactly showing what we think. Should we reframe what we think about when it comes to mom brain? Does this have to do with the perception of women in society? I'll share with you what I think about that part. But join with us today as we discuss what exactly is mom brain. Thank you for joining us. Did you know that there are studies that actually prove that men are more forgetful than women? Yet we can't seem to dodge the labeling of mom brain, despite the fact that the studies have shown us we've got mom brain all wrong. Why? Keep watching to find out more, and don't forget to click subscribe. Hi, Dr. Black. Thank you for joining us again. I'm so excited to talk about this topic because when I found out the truth behind mom brain, I definitely felt that we need to talk about this a little bit more. So when was the first time you heard the term mom
So
brain?
the first time that I heard it was personally, just early on in my friendship social dynamics in regards to the complaints of I don't really have as sharp as a memory, exhaustion, just really just forgetful, forgetting names. So it's something that I actually experienced personally, but also professionally as well.
When I first heard about the term mom brain or pregnancy brain, and we use these terms so regularly in society, right? As women, I think we've also adopted the term and kind of embraced the term in a sense to kind of describe when we do feel forgetful. What surprised me is when I looked at the science behind mom brain, I was actually surprised to find that when you compare those who have been pregnant to those who haven't been pregnant, there really isn't as much drastic differences as we would assume
Mhm.
to explain the what seems to be this forgetful or amnesia effect of being pregnant.
Mhm.
So where do you think this kind of evolution and why are we so willing to embrace this term?
So, first, there are two factors that may be shaping the way that we understand, but also really navigate what's called socially the mom brain. But one is there is real neurological changes that are happening that may not be so acceptable in regards to the life demands and the pulls and expectations that we all form. We live in a modern society where it's not really that forgiving on the internal changes that especially women go through. And there are real biological effects that happens in regards to the adaptation that are not really embraced, understood, or even given compassion at times.
That is so true. And honestly, when you think about, even though we all observe the changes in a individual when they become a mom, even personally, when you watch your friends, your family members become moms, you can see the multitasking ability of both of most parents to really be able to do so many more things than they have done before, to be still pretty much as functional as everybody else is, going
Mhm.
on much less sleep, feeling this higher level of exhaustion, but still functioning at a high level, being able to go to work, being able to teach, being able to multitask with multiple kids. Those are really impressive skills. But
Mhm.
somehow those impressive skills aren't recognized. We seem to be focusing so much more on the deficit. And so I've wondered, for me, when I look at that, I look at the labeling of moms especially, it makes me really think that mom brain is not so much just a descriptive term, but it's actually a term that again is used to undermine the capabilities of women and the capabilities of women who are moms, new moms, returning moms, to be able to do this higher level of thinking. What's interesting is when we look at more animal study and we're looking at the same types of relationship and the same functionality, it's looked at with more a positive light. But when we look at human beings, we seem to have such a negative perspective or negative take on the changes that do happen in the brain.
Mhm.
So what are some of those changes that happen? What are maybe
So,
some of the
and I love the example that you brought up about really looking at primates and other species and the birthing and the process that they go through compared to humans. But one of the factors that we have to keep in mind is that there, the neuroanatomy of a mother actually changes where the gray matter actually becomes a little bit smaller. We call it the shrinking brain. And it can sound as if it's a negative connotation, but it's actually a positive connotation. If you think of the concept of actually pruning a tree, you prune a tree in order for it to actually grow and thrive and really actually be strengthened. So, what the brain does, it gets rid of everything that it really doesn't need in order to actually keep the newborn alive. So, your mind, your brain, the mother's mind and brain is so intricately put together and wonderfully designed to where it's so intelligent, where it gets rid of everything that is not necessary for survival. And it really, really increases and reinforces what does actually keep the baby alive, such as when the brain actually changes, the mom's brain per se, what happens is that the brain actually, there's two parts that particularly are impacted, and one is the prefrontal cortex and the other is the hippocampus. So what that does, I'm going to come back to that shortly, but what it does, it really, really fine tunes the brain to hear the baby's cries, the distinctive cries. So the intelligence of the brain can actually determine whether it's hungry, whether the diaper needs to be changed, whether there's pain, and that is an autonomic process. When we think about what we may experience in regards to witnessing or even ourselves going through the process of the mom brain, the hippocampus, it does really have an impact because it gets rid of memory, right? You're really hyper focused on what the baby needs and not necessarily the worries of the world. But in regards to the prefrontal cortex, the attention and the organization and the planning, it does have a huge impact because taking care of a baby is a little more simplistic. So the way that we're actually organized to actually operate in society and to actually work and to clean and to actually take care of things in a very intricate way, those are not necessary for survival. So the brain is only is only concerned with what is necessary to keep baby alive.
That is absolutely fascinating. And it's fascinating how much, it speaks to how much we place on ourselves as human beings, how much more, how we raise these expectations to what's really not necessary for our day to day. And I think that's partly why, because there is a somewhat of a fall short of these expectations, is how there's so much pressure or these terms are created to describe that quote unquote failure, but it's not a failure. It is just an evidence of her refocusing and the reshaping of her brain to adjust to what she needs. And the other part that I think is also fascinating, thank you for explaining the anatomical changes that are occurring that are then manifesting in these behavioral changes. One of the things I learned about that I thought was really interesting is that these changes are not just occurring in the birthing parent, or the parent that was pregnant, but similar changes are found in the non-birthing parent. So are we missing dads being forgetful? Are we just not labeling them as being forgetful? Like, what is that about? Because if they're having the same brain changes and neuroplastic changes in the brain, then how come we're not as mindful about their lapses in
Sure.
memory?
And that's wonderful and such an important point to bring up. There's a lot of studies that has verified and found it very significant that fathers who are very involved in children in the very early months, years of rearing, their neurological patterns actually change as well. And so that's really attached to attunement. You really can't have attunement unless you're attuned, right, neurologically with a baby. So we don't give a lot of attention to dad's forgetfulness and his attention to cries. And I think it's also room to really understand that there are changes that may be significant, may be different, maybe even scary sometimes for the mother, but also there are beautiful changes as well, such as the ability to actually connect and to actually really prepare as the appropriate mother that the child actually needs.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And you hear other terms being used where moms are explaining like there's a switch that turned on in them that they are so protective of their kids, but
Mhm.
not necessarily having the signs to really support what that change is. And that, or to really connect the dots to show the fact that you're able to do that and you have that protective nature that seems so instinctive is also connected to the fact that you have released other types of functions. And also to go back to something else I wanted to mention in terms of dad before I continue on is the fact that, let's be real, primarily moms are taking care of the bulk of the care of the rearing of kids in general. And so perhaps maybe part of why it seems so obvious is because oftentimes they take on so much more of the rearing of the child, of the caretaking, and perhaps that helps to really highlight or magnify these changes without having the vocabulary to really describe what it is or the understanding to really describe what's physiologically taking place. So I think it's time for us to reframe. I think it's time for us to talk about mom brain in a positive light and celebrate these moments of quote unquote forgetfulness because it's evidence that her brain has changed to become a mom in order to protect and to raise her child.
So I'll just share a few points as well. In regards to societal norms and the expectations on mothers, one of the implications and effects of the change of the mom brain and the difficulty with adapting to being a new mom or even second, third time mom with a newborn is the guilt and shame that's actually attached to it. So we do want to actually be mindful of what's normal and not normal, such as postpartum and depression. But also, 85% of mothers actually go through the process of postpartum blues.
Mhm.
And there's a separation, a differentiation, a change of life, and change in regards to access of freedom. So, those are all normal conditions to try to adapt to. And I would also suggest that if you are a new mom or actually pregnant right now, you want to actually just really prepare, really become open and accepting of help. But the main priority, I can't stress it enough, is adequate sleep. If you can find a way, and I know
Literally just
it's
read my mind. I
difficult.
was just about to say I'm going to mention it. So I'm
Yes,
glad that you brought it up. Yes,
yeah,
yes. Please let
yes,
them know.
because we have to also understand that the reason why there's a difficulty with memory is because there's a lack of sleep. Sleep has a huge impact on memory. It's tied to so many different impacts on short-term and long-term memory. So if you can find a way to actually really navigate and balance your sleep hygiene, I think it would be greatly helpful as well.
Definitely a point that should be highlighted for sure. And most of us can pretty much speak to this on our personal level. When we are tired, the mind just doesn't function the way we want it to function, right? It's a little bit more sluggish, thoughts are a little bit slower, memory is a little bit impaired. So definitely getting sleep, having that support system so that you can sleep, making sure that you have your village, people, and asking for help, as Dr. Black mentioned, because a lot of times moms feel like, I got this. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's not an area of shame. It literally takes a whole village to raise a child because of the demands of raising a child. And so making sure that you're sleeping well, you're eating well, nutrition is also really important, because if you're not getting nutritious meals, guess what? Your body is literally running on zero. Those nutrients are so important in order for the brain to function and to do what it needs to do. That being said, my hope is that we're going to reframe this mom brain, but in order to really change the expectation of society, make sure that moms are getting the support that we need, we really need to really look at these things from a scientific perspective, which is telling us the truth of what is going on, rather than the public court of opinion. And we have plenty of those, and a lot of them are not right. So that being said, Dr. Black, we thank you once again for helping us to break down the ABCs of mom brain. If they wanted to find out more, or perhaps they have identified that they may be in need of additional help because they have some of those other symptoms we were alluding to, where can they find you?
Sure. For resources or referrals, you may contact me at drtamalapractice.com.
Awesome. And I am Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club right here on YouTube. And as always, happy to be the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club on Instagram. We thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and share. And make sure you check out some of our other videos, because we're telling a whole lot of truth and breaking a whole lot of myths. So we hope to see you on our next episode. Be sure to check out some of our other episodes previously. And we always want to know, what are your thoughts? Share your thoughts with us below. Comment, let us know, have you experienced mom brain? How did you feel when you were told that you were experiencing mom brain? We want to know. And until then, we'll see you guys when? Next episode.